Well, here's the part where we talk about ignorance and disaster, and ultimately, what is the Caribou Weather Dudes YouTube channel about? It's about disasters. It's about disasters. Disasters of many different kinds. There it is.
This is bad news.
My God.
Anything can happen.
Yeah! Wow.
I'll watch the video later.
Same time up in this.
This is where we find that the ignorance towards science, towards nature, towards weather phenomenon, towards which ultimately means towards fire behavior, how that becomes politicized, political, how it gets caught in the crosshairs. Good afternoon once again, everybody. Caribou Weather Dude YouTube channel. I'm Joey Only right here in Wells, BC. Once again with more talk on weather, wilderness, world news, and all that kind of stuff. Bad news, good news, news, yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about this one. I mean, it's easy to look at what's happening down there in the States and pretend that it doesn't affect us, right? And it does for a number of reasons, first of all. So there's been these big cuts against the U.S. Forest Service, 3,400 people laid off and 1,000 in the U.S. national parks. Now, as you know, a lot of the firefighter crews, hotshots, wildland firefighters, are paid for out of this U.S. Forest Service. A lot of fire prevention is done from there, so we made that meme last week of Smokey the Bear saying, only you can prevent forest fires. And then it says below, no, really, I mean it because I just lost my job, and that's the reality, right? So why does this make us more unsafe here in Canada? Well, for a number of reasons we'll get to as we talk through this article. One is these guys come up here and fight our fires. So if this Doge inefficiency bullshit is going on at the same time as a trade war is happening and now we're becoming more and more enemies, here's a firefighting response we may not necessarily be able to count on because at the highest levels, the political puppet strings are saying, no, we're not going to waste money going to Canada. No, we don't have enough crews anymore to go to Canada. B, we're now structurally set up to fail. So now when crisis happens, we can say, oh, look, mismanagement. Because that's the standard play here is to deflect away from climate change and pretend that wildfires aren't getting worse more and more and more. Largely because temperatures are up and conditions are drier and drier and drier. There's a simple formula to fire behavior. There's a simple formula. You take the moisture out of things, you put the heat up, eventually you have the conditions for more aggressive and extreme fires. So when you have these more aggressive and extreme fires that aren't, we don't have the resources to hit them before they become big and aggressive and extreme now. We don't have boots on the ground. This is really problematic. You think of, there's 10,000 firefighters in the U.S. Forest Service. Losing 3,400 jobs is a big deal. It's a really big deal. Another reason why this climate denial-based attack on services such as wildland fire is concerning is because we see a lot of that rhetoric here in Canada. We see a lot of that blaming the government for fires, blaming a weather machine that doesn't exist on fires, saying that the government's burnt a town down on purpose. This sort of like what I consider to be extremist conspiracy theory mentality. I mean, I've worked fires, man. I've never met anybody who's an officer or leadership in BC Wildfire Service or any other organization I've worked with. I've been around Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec firefighters, Nova Scotia firefighters, hotshots from around the USA. I've been around Mexicans, South Africans. I've been around Australians. I've never met anybody who doesn't really care, who doesn't love to win the battle. Loves the battle because they love winning. They believe they can win, they want to win. And if you handicap them in any way, you're going to take away their ability to win. It's going to make the job more dangerous. You're going to have more people who are exhausted, stressed, working longer hours, working in more dangerous conditions, working with less support. It puts the people in the front line at risk, and it puts the people whose communities are at risk. But also, if we allow this new narrative, sorry, you might have realized I've just not been sitting at my microphone and computer because my back's just been hurting lately with the weather change, especially. And I find I can't sit comfortably right now at my workstation. And, as the days go on where I'm not sitting there near as much because I'm only sitting there to edit instead of record and edit, for example, and I'm not playing World of Warships at night, it's letting my spasms and whatnot, my shoulders kind of subside a little bit. So Anyways, so this rhetoric that would attack them, we see it in Canada showing up. We see people talk that way. We see people, the hostility, and even people being defiant of evacuation orders and whatnot in the past here in BC over the last couple of years. And I don't just mean defiant in the way of like, well, I can win, so I'm staying. Like, I have pumps, I have hose, I'm sprinklered up, I'm ready to go. I have experience, I have a machine. You know, that's the case. And a lot of times incident commandos would say, well, okay, we'll keep a close eye on you and have at her, right? You know, we need help here too. Like, protect your home if you can. But, you know, we don't want that to be the public perception if that's what you do. And in these cases, you know, if you leave the evacuation zone, sorry, you're not coming back in, because we're trying to make sure that houses aren't getting robbed and people aren't just coming and going at will. And, you know, we need to have accurate counts on who's in here and who's not. And you're making that more difficult. No, once you leave, you leave. So you want to stay for a little while and see what you can do to prepare your property. Like, no one can actually stop you. Fair enough, but we can stop you from coming back in. Yeah. So, but anyways, these protests that happened down there at Scotch Creek and whatnot, highly aggressive, in which as a firefighter, I don't want to deal with hostile, aggressive people. We just want to get from our camp to the fire, do our work for the day, get out, get fed, get rested. We have enough on our plate as it is. So, you know, we see increased funding for fire in Canada. We need to keep seeing that. And I just worry that this rhetoric, because it seems to be like every bad idea starts down there and comes up here. And then next thing you know, we're in trouble. But still, nonetheless, I'm worried for my American friends who fight fire. And I'm worried for the possibility that we may not be able to count on their help soon in the near future. So Trump's funding cuts leave the nation vulnerable to catastrophic wildfire.
Filthy. And, oh yeah, my boots. Yeah, I can't really see them. They're full of water. So squish, squish, squish.
So you cut all these fire services. You cut 3,400 people out of U.S. Forest Service. And then you expect there to be a better product.
What do they want? More fires?
And when there isn't a better product, then you can point at it and say, look, it's broken. And then proceed to deregulate it even further from there. So we have to stand in solidarity with our American brothers and sisters, all of us firefighters.
Originally on ProPublica, but it's reprinted on High Country News. After the story was reported, 3,400 employees from the U.S. Forest Service lost their jobs. So this is after the story was first reported. So they want to shrink the federal government, and they're launching this attack just after the deadly Palisades fire and during the Eaton fires, during these fires in Los Angeles. And you know, some of these attacks, like they just need to turn the water on, which was complete horse shit. And then they, just to say that he did, Trump sent these army engineers out to open the dams, and it nearly flooded out these communities. This is all, you can all look this up, this is all true. And local water people, local government, farmers and whatnot were like, please do not do this, please shut it off. So it's like they wasted all this water that could have been used for farming this summer, just flushed it down the drain so that Trump could go on a camera and say, we've released the water. So they've frozen funds, including money by Congress, with a deluge of orders eliminating federal employees, which has thrown out agencies tasked with battling blazes into disarray. Individual offices and managers are now struggling to interpret the directives. The uncertainty has limited training and postponed work already. And this is before these cuts came just recently. It's led to firefighters a little choice but to leave the force already, their colleagues say. So ProPublica spoke to a dozen firefighters who assist with the federal wildfire response across the country and across different agencies. They described a range of immediate impacts on a workforce that was already stressed by budgetary woes predating the Trump administration. Hiring of some seasonal workers had stalled. Money for partner nonprofits that assist with fuel reduction projects has been frozen. And crews that had traveled to support prescribed burns in Florida were turned back, while those assisting with wildfire cleanup in California faced confusion over how long they would be allowed to do that work. Uncertainty is at an all-time high and morale at an all-time low, said one worker. They don't want to be named because they're afraid of the White House. In separate lawsuits, judges have been issuing injunctions against this now. This is an ongoing legal thing that's there's more up-to-date information than what's on here. But in one case, the freeze to bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funding combined with orders limiting travel by some federal employees forced the National Park Service to cancel a massive prescribed burn schedule for January and February in the Everglades National Park and also Big Cypress National Park. Prescribed burns are the cheapest way to prevent catastrophic wildfires by clearing vegetation that serves as fuel. The meticulously planned 151,000-acre Florida fire was to cover more than 6 times the land of nearby Miami. It was meant to protect a Native American reservation and improve ecological diversity. Ouch. Trump doesn't care about ecological diversity or Native American nations. We'll be more vulnerable to catastrophic fire in the future as a result of not being able to do the prescribed burns. The National Park Service gave conflicting explanations for the cancellation because they're scared to say anything. The U.S. Forest Service has more than 10,000 firefighters, is racked by long-running deficits and lack of support for the physical and mental health stresses inherent in the job. Federal firefighters told ProPublica they're happy to do the dangerous job because we love it. It's the best job on earth, man. I sit here all winter long just hoping that I'm the one who gets called. If there's only one fire in all of British Columbia this next season, I hope I get to be there. And that's the way firefighters are. We love to go and win. So anytime there's this talk that, we're purposefully, we're either the fires are happening the way they are because we're screwing up or because we purposefully made it happen. It's very harmful. It's very hurtful when you look at how much sacrifice people put out in their lives to do this job, right? And we love to do the job. They love to do the job. Everyone loves the job who does the job, who sticks with it, A spokesperson for the Forest Service said in a statement that major prescribed burn training program was proceeding as planned, and active management, including hazardous fuel reduction and prescribed fires, continue under other funding authorities. Protecting the people and communities we serve, as well as the infrastructure, businesses, and resources they depend on to grow and thrive, remains a top priority. They can't say anything officially. The reality is supervisors are guessing how to interpret the White House's commands, and a huge leadership vacuum is now already resulting in conflicting orders. A national firefighting leadership training program McLean was set to attend was canceled on short notice. McLean acknowledged that federal firefighting agencies need a major overhaul. His crew is downsized 30% already pre-Trump. But the current confusion could further impact public safety because of the lack of clear leadership and the disrupted preparations for wildfire season. This is terrifying, man. Wildfire doesn't care about our bureaucratic calendar. The threat of wildfire is year-round in the southeast and spreads west and north as snow melts and temperatures rise. In the west, fire season generally starts in the spring, although climate change has extended the season by more than 2 months over the past few decades. Preparations for fire season begin in the southeast each year, where mild winters allow crews to carry out prescribed burns while snow blankets the west. In a typical year, crews fly in from across the country to assist in containing the planned fires and to train for battling fires. These are useful training tools, not only for how to do a proper prescribed controlled burn, but also, as you're doing that, you have opportunity to practice firefighting tactics. So Southeast typically accounts for 2/3 of the acreage treated with federal prescribed burns. The controlled burns serve several purposes: minimizing the size of naturally occurring fires by reducing available fuel, promoting biodiversity by creating varied habitat and recycling nutrients into the soil, and providing an opportunity for training in controlled settings. Any delays this time of year set preparations back, and numerous firefighters raised the alarm about the canceled burn in the Everglades. Crews arrived for 3-week assignments to assist with the burn, which was planned alongside the Miccosukee tribe of Indians of Florida and was to remove fuel near the Miccosukee Indian village. The goal, according to National Park Service press release, was to protect the tribal community from fire, enhance landscape resiliency, aid in ecosystem restoration, protect cultural values, and improve on firefighter and public safety. But some crews were told to head home early, according to a firefighter with direct knowledge of the situation. "We do not have the resources to control this burn now," the firefighter says. That's an example of one of these prescribed burns right here, removing all that dead grass. National Park Service representative. So you say, go rake the forest, go rake the forest, go rake the forest. This is how you rake the forest in reality, because no one can go there and rake an entire forest. Then what do you do with the piles of stuff you raked up? Eventually, you come to the conclusion, well, the easiest thing to do with those piles is burn them. Well, why rake the forest when you can just burn prescribed burn? You skip that whole step. So the whole raking the forest thing is an absolute abomination towards firefighters everywhere. The burn was canceled, did not answer question about the reason. So we already can guess the reasons, right? Musk. Internally, the agency acknowledged that gaps in funding and staffing forced it to abandon the plan until at least next fiscal year. The agency also told staff that congressionally appropriated funds were frozen, hirings were halted, and overtime was strictly limited. Prescribed burns across the country require travel or overtime pay have been limited. Nonprofits that manage complementary burns, according to the acreage treated, have seen their federal funding frozen, and some state agencies have been locked out of these funds. In Montana, the state's Department for Natural Resources and Conservation uses federal grants to assist communities in becoming more resistant to fire. The money was cut off, according to emails to ProPublica. What do they want? More fires? Mary Louise Knapp, a Montana resident who has worked with the Department on Fire Resiliency in her own neighborhood, said of the Trump administration. Yes, they do. That's actually what they do. They do. Either knowingly or unknowingly, that's exactly what this shows. This behavior is a behavior of somebody who wants things to get worse. Any short-term savings from the funding freeze, one federal firefighter said, are likely to be eclipsed by the vast resources now needed to combat even larger fires. They still don't have the budget under control.
Ha! That's kind of fun. That's really fucking hot. Just gonna tilt my head down, keep it off my face, and I'll watch the video later. Woo!
The government's accountability office in 2023 found in a study that low pay, which does not reflect the risk of physical and the physical demands of the work, made hiring and retaining firefighters difficult. There's a lot of turnover, and people say, I love this job, but it's time to get on with a real job. And I've even had, sometimes joked I might have to get a real job if it doesn't stop raining, and that's how I feel about it. Every year I'm like clinging as a contract firefighter to a hope that our crew gets called out and I get enough work to get EI, which years like last year are very difficult. And hence I decided, hey, I'm just going to go with the channel this winter and see how far I can get with this. And thank you to everyone who supported me in trying to push my YouTube channel to the next level. Hit like, share, subscribe. The reality is setting in. They don't have the budget under control, one firefighter says. Even though firefighting positions were exempted, personnel who do other jobs often assist with fires, and a lack of support staff could force firefighters to do additional work such as maintaining recreational trails, taking them away from fire-related duties. Much of the force is hired seasonally or switches between crews and agencies at different times of the year. But the increased certainty has prompted once reliable seasonal hires to do other jobs. So what you do have here in Canada is that the provinces are the ones who run Wildfire. There's been some talk about, at least theorized amongst people like myself, like, do we need a national firefighting force? I don't think so. I think what we could do, seeing as we all have this pressure on us to increase our military spending, is we could maybe invest in some more aviation assets that are usable for both search and rescue and wildfire. The new CL-515s can do that. I know we're waiting a long time on orders for those to come, right? Still, there's things that I think we could do to increase spending militarily that would go to firefighting response and also to ability to respond, more professionalized response crew from DND, Canadian Armed Forces, able to combat fire. So I think in the past we had some crews show up that had no idea what they were doing here in BC. It seemed like over time that's improved because guys are getting experience, right? When you don't get a whole lot of experience, like, well, you're trained to do this, and now you're over here fighting fire. So it's not like we can blame them for not knowing everything off the bat or having a lot of experience. Nonetheless, professionalizing a response force that can assist in Canada and beyond, right? So like we're fully into the battle in some weekend in August here, and there's like towns under threat, and it's like, well, we have this 300-person force, which includes aircraft and this and that from DND, and maybe we can increase our military spending that way. That's just an idea I have that's sort of separate to the idea of a national firefighting force. So their firefighting force is more national, the interagency, fire interagency. There is, more works as a coordinated federal response as opposed to our provincial assets like the BC Wildfire Service here. which have different tactics and styles and recruitment styles and safety regulations and things as you go province to province. There's not really one unified standard to like what would be equivalent of our S100 necessarily across the board, but it's, everyone's a little different, but also they have different terrain. For example, we don't have the muskeg of Ontario and Quebec and places and up north that we can just dig a hole and put a pump in the ground. So wildfires are growing larger and more catastrophic. The area of land burned annually over the past decade was 43% larger than the average since the federal government began tracking in 1983. The long snowballing effects. The bureaucratic turbulence will have long-term consequences. One federal employee involved in training programs likened the federal funding freeze during the prime training season to a massive sledgehammer hitting the force. The firefighter painted a stark picture of the harms, instructors quitting, workers in the dark about whether they can travel to receive instruction, and leadership positions potentially remaining vacant as firefighters who lack required training are unable to qualify for promotions. Any pause in the training system can have long snowballing effects. Additionally, the workforce is stressed by the executive orders calling for programs related to topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion to be shuttered, including employee support groups and seminars on topics such as women in the wildfire community. My God, this is so cruel, so mean-spirited. The government websites have already been scrubbed of information lauding progress in diversifying the male-dominated federal firefighting force. And a lot of men will tell you, we really appreciate women firefighters. I was talking on a wildfire group the other day on Facebook, and it was about women in the fire force. And I said, I've never had any of my women firefighters be missing because they were out drinking. And I've had that with men. But I've also found, like if you look at, say, Statlium people here in BC, they're mountain people and they're very short. A stocky, short build is really good for steep country, And what I find is the physical coordination and the light-footedness of women makes them very comfortable in terrain that sometimes big, really tall, lanky men are stumbling through and tripping over. So, whereas the big, tall, strong guy might make up a few pounds of lift power, at the same time, the physical dynamics of someone with lower gravity can lead to, so I don't buy this at all that women can't fight wildfire like men. Absolutely not. We have different things we bring to the table. And it's good if in every crew you have one or two of those, big, tall, strong guys. And it's good if you have a couple people who are light-footed and nimble, can get around and do stuff fast. Hey, can you go check that out for me? Bam, gone. Right? Speed. The 2 million federal employees are seen as the boogeymen, and we're really not, says former fire chief of aviation Kelly Martin at Yosemite National Park. It's devastating, the impact on morale for federal employees that have committed their lives and moved their families into rural communities now. They're finding, I may not have a job. Unbelievable this happening. And, how does this affect us in BC? Like I said, we can't count now on having hotshot crews being able to come and assist us when we're at the height of our season. And what that also means is a lot of times those type 1 assets come and they serve as incident commanders on other fires, which means more contract crews get deployed because there's more leadership on the ground, more type 1 crews able to run the show. So this perception that them coming up here to help us takes away our work isn't true. It often leads to more work. It's often, BC Wildfire is so tied up and we're all sitting here as contract crews going, where's our calls? And then suddenly all these out of country assets show up, these type 1 crews from Australia or the United States or whatever. And 3 or 4 days later, we start getting calls saying, okay, we have a deployment for you coming up here. You're going to this fire that sort of out here in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have time for it. But now that we have extra assets that we can kind of relegate BC wildfire crews to different places instead of this place.
So just want to say to our American firefighting bros down there and sisters, we're there for you. We're worried about you. We love you. We're thankful for all the times you come up here and helped us. We hope that won't be interfered with. Ultimately, you being left more vulnerable leaves us more vulnerable. And I'm concerned that as more weather data is restricted or becomes unavailable, as cuts are made to National Weather Service and NOAA and other organizations that you rely on to get fire weather forecasting right, that puts us more at risk too, because we rely on a lot of your data as well as our own, right? So the more data, the better when you're talking about weather, fire behavior, fire prevention, fire activity in general, right? So understand that, this isn't just their problem. It's our problem. And it's also indicative of a mentality that a lot of people have here to blame fire services, to blame BC Wildfire, to be hostile towards us in their communities, to expect us to win fights when fire activity is so extreme that nobody can actually win it. I think about an example down south a few years ago where people refused to evacuate, and then they were mad that BC Wildfire left. And so they thought they were going to stay there and fight the fire themselves. And then what ended up happening was the fire came through and burnt everything up anyways, because that's what was going to happen, because that was the fire activity at that time. You weren't going to be able to stop it. Almost nothing would, until the humidity came up, the temperature came down, and fire activity became less extreme, perhaps less wind, whatever was going on at that time, to kick fire activity up into another level.
So anyways, this is what I gotta say about this for today. Solidarity to my friends down south. We're thinking about you, care about you. My firefighting brothers and sisters I've worked with from the USA. We owe you so much for coming up here to help us. And I know at times we've sent assets down to help you, and that should be the way it is. It should be that spirit of cooperation. Should be because we care about each other, we care about the land, we care about people, we care about communities, we care about doing the right thing. We're firefighters. We want to do the right thing. We want to be on the right side of history. We want to be proud of ourselves when we look at it in the mirror and say, yeah, I did all I could. I did all I could. I did all I could. And that, when it comes with things be on fire, that border don't matter to me. It doesn't matter how mad I am at America. If they're like, hey, we need this fire to be fought, we are going to go. And that's how it needs to stay. So all this development is very concerning when you put it in the context of the worsening relationship between Canada and the United States. Okay, that's what I have to say for this afternoon on that topic. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll talk to you very soon. Hit like, share, subscribe. Tell a friend. Bye now.